How many understand God speaks? I want that thought to really kind of saturate your brain right now. God speaks. Here's what's wild. God spoke to you today. God spoke to you today. You say, I don't know. I'm only at 2 cups of coffee right now. I'm not sure how that... God speaks. God speaks to us every day. I believe God speaks in so many ways. And sometimes we recognize it, sometimes we don't. Obviously, you open the Word of God, you begin to read, God begins to speak. But I'm telling you, He speaks in many different areas. If I ask for a show of hands and I said, how many would like to hear what God's saying? How many would like to hear what God's saying specifically about your life? A lot of people might raise their hands. Some of you that are a little more analytical might go, I'm not sure if I want to hear what he has to say right now. Just depending on kind of what you're feeling, what you're going through. But listen to me. God speaks. He speaks. Bible says that it talks about how He is evident in His creation, that we're without excuse. You could just look around. We were raking up leaves yesterday and filled like 6 bags of those yard bags. And Heather and I are raking leaves, and she was working hard, and I was looking over there, and she's looking at me, and I'm like trying to rake more than her, and it turned into a competition. It was great. And I have muscles today I never knew I had because they're screaming today. I can feel it. But what was awesome is we begin to have a conversation, and we have different kinds of trees kind of around the neighborhood there, and so they produce a different color leaf, and you look at it, and I'm telling you, from that, God speaks. I go, but God, that's not man designed, that's God designed. He's speaking from His creation. He's speaking. He's not His creation, He's Him, but He speaks through it, right? Look around, you see that sunrise, you see that sunset, God speaks. You see the aspect of the animals, of the hills, I had the opportunity to go out west and do some antelope hunting a couple weeks ago, and seeing the hills, and seeing the Black Hills, and seeing the plains, God speaks. Went down in Missouri, and I see the Ozark Mountains, and God speaks. He's speaking. He speaks forth from His creation, but in your situation, God speaks. And I believe every day God is speaking. Are we listening? Are we listening? See, God speaks, and it's specific. Some of you know a little bit of our story. You know a little bit of my story. At age 4, I was saved at a vacation Bible school. I remember that night, I got the prize for bringing the most friends at 4 years of age. I had like 7 or 8 friends with me. And I remember at the end of the service, they give what they called an altar call. And it was just that time that, here's the opportunity to give your life to Christ. I felt at 4 years of age, God speaking to me. He was speaking to me. Was it audible? No, but I knew that He was speaking. And I went down, and about as fast as my knees hit the ground, and I prayed, I was back up. But at 4 years of age, I recognized God speaking. You fast forward, about age 17, I felt God speaking to me that life wasn't just about me and what I wanted to do, but it was about what He wanted to do through me. And I felt this call of God on my life. I was at a youth camp, and I wanted to receive everything that God had, and I was praying about the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and I received this word from God that He was calling me to a greater work. Something that was beyond what I saw, but something was what He was seeing, and He was gonna cause me to live for His desires and not my own, and this power. And God was speaking. I'm telling you, church, God speaks. And my life wasn't like any different than your life. I've had my ups and downs. I've had my good times, my bad times. I've had difficulties. I've had victory. I've had defeat. Walked through that, but all through it, God speaks. And you may be here in a relationship, and you may be in a dark time. You may be walking down a path that you're not sure how it's going to play out. Listen to me. God's speaking. You've got to listen. You've got to focus. So here's this question. We're going to start this new kind of mini-series, God Speaks. How does God speak? Well, how does God speak? We're going to look at that. Because if we don't understand that God speaks, then how are we to understand how He speaks? So we have to know God speaks. We have to understand who He is and how He does this. there was a time we had a ministry, Adopt-A-Block, and from time to time, this was at another church that we pastored, and we would get donations from like grocery stores. We had a food ministry, and one day the grocery store said, hey, we've got these cakes. Would you like them? I'm like, sure, we'll take them. And so we took these cakes. Well, one of them was this big, huge birthday cake, had all these balloons on it. It's a birthday cake. And so we have it, and we're like, well, what do we do with a birthday cake, you know? And we had met a new family, and Heather, my wife, she was over this area, this block, this area. And this one particular family, she had a student that was on her team. His name was Ben. Ben and his wife now are church planners in Tennessee. But Ben was there, and so they're sorting through all the food, and here's this birthday cake. And Ben looks at Heather and goes, I think we should take that birthday cake to that new family that we met. And she goes, okay, but it's a birthday cake. That's kind of weird. I mean, imagine you go knock on somebody's door. Hey, I brought you something. It's a birthday cake. There you go. You know, are they going to go, you weirdo people? Like, that's crazy. But Ben felt God speaking. We need to take that family a birthday cake. Heather goes, okay, let's do it. So they go out on the block. They take this cake, this big birthday cake. It's got balloons on it. It's a kid's cake. It's a kid's birthday cake. It's just a generic birthday cake. Happy birthday. Hey, how you doing? Hey, we met you guys and all this. Hey, we brought you a birthday cake. Would you like that? And they look at each other, and it kind of gets emotional, and they start tearing up. And how did you know? Like, our son's birthday's today, and little boy, and this is a kid's birthday cake, and we didn't have the ability to get him a cake, and we were racking our brains this morning, going, what can we do? How can we? And you show up with a birthday cake. God speaks, church. God speaks. He takes those little things that don't even make sense to us, that maybe even crosses the line to us, that we go, that's just weird. That's not that big a deal. You know what? How about I not do that, and then it's just kind of save face? Yeah, but God spoke. God speaks. And when we're obedient with what God speaks to us, amazing things happen. Families are blessed. Details are fulfilled, specifics are in place, and something dynamic occurs, amen? God speaks. Well, how does God speak? First, if you're taking notes, write this down. God speaks progressively. God speaks progressively. He guides us. There's step by step. There's a day by day. Each new word building upon each new word. What God gives you today is to be used, not just in the moment, but to be used. It's a building block for this journey, for this path, for this life that He's taking, this journey that He's taking you on. And He's with you all the way. God speaks progressively. I kind of want that thought to get into your mind, but here's our problem. We get progressive and thrifty confused. Progressive and thrifty confused. I want to give you a couple definitions here. As progressive is, it means moving forward gradually, advancing, improving. That's what progressive is. That's how God speaks. Thrifty is frugal, sparing, careful. See, we sometimes associate God that, well, He's just not going to put too much on me, that you know, he'll never give me something that I can't handle. Yes, He will, always. He's always going to speak something to you that you're going to go, whoa, God, I can't handle that. And He's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, no biggie. Yeah, because I'm with you. Yeah, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. So God will always give you something that you can't handle, because He's progressive, because He's giving you, He's equipping you, He's empowering you, He's making available to you something that you can't manufacture and do on your own. And it's this journey, and He's speaking every day. Every day. He's not thrifty about it, going, I just don't want to overwhelm Him. Yeah, He does. He's perfectly fine with overwhelming you. Why? Because He doesn't want you to walk in your strength. He wants you to walk in His strength, His power. As He speaks to you, as He reveals His will, as He walks with you in this journey. So He speaks progressively. Don't confuse thrifty and progressive. God moves progressively, but never does He move on behalf of us in a thrifty way. When God first spoke to Abraham, character, Old Testament hero of the faith, Abraham, ultimately called Father Abraham. From him, you have Isaac, you have Jacob, and Jacob's name changed to Israel. You have the children of Israel. The promise is attached, called the Abrahamic promise, attached to Abraham. Abraham, big-time character, messed up family, messed up life, but God used him. It's interesting in this journey, this man of faith, how God first encounters Abraham and tells him, you're going to leave everything you've ever known, and you're going to go to a place that I'll tell you about. I mean, that's kind of overwhelming. That's not thrifty. That's progressive. That causes us to do things like this. Well, God, okay, but where? Why? Lord, like, what do you mean everything? Like everything? Like, I mean, God, that really doesn't sound comfortable. Because God's not thrifty. God's progressive. Why is he progressive? Because he's going to empower the journey, and you just have to trust him. Listen, he's speaking. He spoke to you today. Sometimes just listening to God involves just simply being obedient with what you have. Well, Abraham, he gets this word from the Lord. Do you realize that once he acts on this word, we're going to read here in a moment, once he acts on this word, 45 years go by. 45 years go by, and God looks at Abraham's life and speaks to him in the aspect of a test of his firstborn son. Now, in the story of Abraham, if you think, I've talked to a lot of people, and we could all raise our hand in some aspect or another, that you think your family is messed up. Like you come from a crazy family, and if you knew the stories and all this. If you want to feel better about your family and your situation, you should read about some of the families here in Scripture, because they are a mess. They're messed up. And Abraham is one of those families. It's a mess. Like he and his wife, they want to have kids, and they feel like God spoke to them this promised child, but no child is happening. So, hey, we're going to create a promise. And how about you go sleep with the servant girl, and we'll have a child through her. Yeah, that seems like a bright idea. And so they have Ishmael. That wasn't what God spoke. That's what they felt. I mean, read the story. We're not going to get into that story as a side note, but God had in mind, God was speaking Isaac to them, to the point that the word refers to your only son. Your only son's Isaac. That's who I spoke. That's who I spoke about. I mean, read it. Just read the story. 45 years goes by. I've obeyed. I've gone. I've left everything. I've gone to a place that you showed me. He shows him, and God tests him. And he speaks this. Look at it. Genesis 22, 1 through 3. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. It's a crazy story. You're going to have to go back and read it. Once you go back and read it, that's your homework. Go back and read it. Read the whole story. Abraham obeys God, obeys what God speaks to him. What God is speaking to him is seemingly in the logical mind. You're going, Lord, why? Why would I do? Why would you give me this son? Why would you? God's testing him. God saw something in Abraham that needed to be tested in the aspect of his faith in God. God will speak something to you, something to me, that will test you to the very fiber of your being. And you say, but that doesn't make sense. That just seems like that. Why would I have to? You know what? Maybe I'm just not going to. Careful. You're going to miss what God's speaking progressively, because in this, he's not doing it in your power. He's not doing it in your perspective. He's doing it in who he is as a sovereign Lord, the creator of heaven and earth, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning, the end, the first and the last say of everything of our life. That's a different perspective and angle than any of us could ever have. God speaks. He speaks to Abraham. Abraham puts his son on the altar, raises the knife, and God says, stop. All right, I'll provide. He just wanted obedience. He just wanted obedience to what he spoke. That's all he wants in your life. Just obedience to what he speaks. Interesting. I doubt Abraham would have been prepared for such a difficult word early on. He was just trying to get out of his own comfort zone. See, sometimes the longer I walk with God, the more I begin to trust him. Heather and I will be married about 25 years in January, And the things that we experience together now in the journey, the things we'll share now, she knows me and I know her so much better, so much different than we did back here. If I unloaded some of the things, or she unloaded some of the things, or the thoughts, or the difficulties, or, the processing here that we have here, we may not have ever made it to here, right? God speaks progressively in our life. It's like Abraham. Abraham, all right, let's just deal with your comfort zone. I'm going to speak to your comfort zone. I want you to leave everything, and I want you to go to a place that I have for you. Whew, okay. All right, Lord, I'm going to trust you. We sang the song, You've Never Failed Me Yet. And all right. Now, 45 years into his journey, you know what? I see this trust thing with the child, with the promise. I mean, you've already created Ishmael. That's a whole thing. You know what? You fully love me. You're fully devoted to me. Give me your only son. Give me your only son. Whew, okay. I mean, back here is just a comfort zone. Up here, this is big. This is huge. But Abraham did it, and God came through and provided. God didn't need his son. God didn't want his son. He just wanted Abraham to see what was important, what needed to be important, what needed to be obedient with, what he needed to be obedient with. Same thing in your life and my life. God speaks, and we have to listen, but we have to be obedient. Amen? Jesus, he taught his disciples in a progressive way. Jesus being 100% God, 100% man, he speaks to his disciples. He teaches them in a progressive way, but he unloads it. He delivers it in such a way of what they can handle and what they need to deal with, because the next things, it's just going to be progressive. It's going to build. What I give you here, you're going to need for here. And it's this building of this journey as he speaks to them. He didn't speak to them about the cross early on in the ministry. He didn't come to them and say, hey, come follow me, and hey, and by the way, in about 3 years I'm going to die, and your world's going to be wrecked. And yeah, so anyway, yeah, it's going to be exciting. Come on. I mean, he didn't do that. Up front, he didn't talk about the cross and what he was going to go through. It wasn't until they came to understand that later in the journey. I want to read you a portion of the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verse 13 through 20. It says, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, he said, who do people say the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist. I mean, John the Baptist is dead. He's been beheaded at this time, so they're speaking. It's a spiritual insight here. Well, some say you're John the Baptist. And others say Elijah, the prophet of old. And others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? In other words, as God is speaking to them in this situation, what's the perspective? What's the perspective? What's kind of the foundation of the perspective? And actually, what's your perspective? What are you hearing? And out of what you're hearing, what are you believing? He's establishing it. He knows. He wants them to know. See, God knows what you need. He wants you to trust him in that. And it's never guesswork for him. It's just faith work on our part. So he speaks to him. Simon Peter, only one, he speaks up, says, Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. Some people are thrown by that name. Bar is Aramaic for son, and so it's saying Simon Peter, son of Jonah. So Peter's dad is named Jonah. It's not Jonah the whale. That's a different time frame. But his dad's name's Jonah. So Simon Bar-Jonah, you're blessed. It says, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Let me time out for a second. That'd be a pretty good word. You know, God speaks to you, and you comment back what you feel is the right answer, and he tells you all this stuff, and you're like, you know, I mean, if you were Simon Peter, you'd be looking back at the other guys going, yeah. Right answer. Yeah, pretty good. And it was almost like this conversation goes, wah, wah. Look what he says to him. Verse 20, then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. What? Like, you give us all this information, you speak this to us, you encourage us with, the gates of hell aren't even going to prevail. We've got all the power. We got keys to the kingdom. This is great, but then I'm not to talk. Why? God is speaking progressive. He's giving them a nugget of information here, and they've got to be ready for what's going to happen here. So they got to process through this. They got to know that they know who he is. See, there's a lot of people, you want God to speak to you, but you still don't know who he is. God, just speak these deep things to me. Just tell me everything that's on your heart about my life, Lord. Just unload it on me. Imagine if Heather and I got married day one and I go, I'm just going to unload all my deepest thoughts, my hang-ups, my addictions, my weaknesses. Here we go. She's like, Mom, Dad, he's crazy. I'm out of here. You know what I mean? She couldn't handle all that, right? I couldn't have handled all her baggage. But over time, as we process it, God speaks progressively to us, but what he speaks to us, we've got to take it. There's a timing issue of it. The disciples were still simply working on, after all this time, who he was. And he goes, here's the deal. Here's the keys, the kingdom, the power of binding it on heaven, or binding it on earth is in heaven, and he gives them all this. But here, don't tell anybody I'm the Christ yet. And it wasn't that they weren't ready for it. The disciples weren't ready for that yet. They're still working through these. And Jesus spoke very progressively to them. Look at the next scripture here. This is Matthew 16:21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. He begins to unpack the story for them. They needed that unpacking. They needed the full story. So here's some great news. Here's some things. Don't just go run out and declare it because you're not ready for that. But here's the rest of the story. And then once they had all that, of course, we see it. They go and change the world. God was speaking progressively to them. It was forward moving, and he spoke to them that way. And he speaks to us this way. And they simply, at one point, weren't ready. Remember the game hide and go seek? Hide and go seek, as a kid, one of my favorite places to play hide and go seek was at my grandma and grandpa's house. And I went back to that house years later when I was an adult. They had moved from that house. And I remember in my mind, that house was a mansion. Like, it was huge. I'll be honest with you. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, about a 1,500 square foot home. When I got back as an adult, and I was like, wow, it just seems so much bigger, running across there. But I remember one of our favorite places to hide was in the bathroom in the shower, and all the cousins would get together, and oftentimes, the one person would be counting, and they would, ready or not, here I come. And I remember we would hide in the bathroom. They had this huge shower doors, and we would all get in there and be hiding. And there's a couple different times my grandpa, he'd come in to go to the bathroom, and he would almost be ready to go to the bathroom. We'd all jump out and, hey, and scare him. And that was just always a blast. And he had a heart condition and an aneurysm, and it was a wonder we had never killed him at that time. Loved hide and go seek. Ready or not, here I come. We think God plays hide and go seek with us. How he speaks in our life. We think that God's playing a game and he's going, all right, here's the deal. Ready or not, here I come. He doesn't do that with us. He gets us ready. He prepares us. He speaks preparation. He speaks the process. He speaks something that if you'll take it, it could be as simple as a birthday cake. And you take it and you're obedient with it. All of a sudden, it has prepared you for something progressive of what he has next for you. And though you may like this game and all this, God's not into games. God's just into a journey and a relationship with you. And in that, there's so much more than just fun. There's power. There's life. There's change. See, God speaks consistently. Secondly, God speaks consistently. He'll never speak in an unholy or an inconsistent manner according to his character or his word. He will always be consistent with his word. He'll always be consistent with it. Psalm 60 Verse 6 says, God has spoken in his holiness. That word could also be translated from his sanctuary. He speaks from an aspect of holiness, and it's not a holiness that we ascribe as good. It's pure. There is absolutely no darkness. There's absolutely no impurity. God's holiness is the complete definition of holiness, and that's what he speaks from. Holiness. He speaks from righteousness. Look at Psalm 65:5. By awesome deeds you answer us with righteousness. His holiness and his righteousness are what his words to us are formed from. And he speaks to us, and it's consistent, church. God doesn't speak one way to somebody and another way to somebody else. And here's what I mean, is I've heard this, you've heard this, and hopefully you haven't said this or lived this. I know that God's word says, but I really believe that God's saying to me, no. Doesn't work that way. Well, yeah, but God's progressively speaking, and he's taking me on this journey, and I know it's different than others, and I know it may seem like really unbiblical, but I really think that God, no. God doesn't speak that way. He's consistent with his word. He's consistent with the aspect of holiness and righteousness to you. Now, analytical thinkers would go, yeah, but Abraham, he told him, go sacrifice his son. I mean, that seemed really crazy. Did he sacrifice his son? No, it was a test. You got to remember, the one who is asking this, the one who is saying this, is the one who is all holy, all righteous. Well, it's a game. No, it wasn't a game. It was a test. God saw something in Abraham that needed tested. And he did it at the very core of Abraham. All right, you love me? Really? Okay. How about you go sacrifice that son that was so worth completely messing your family up over to get that promise, to hear your own voice, to try to circumvent the process, try to circumvent the time frame. How about you give him to me? I tell you what, you go to a place and you're going to sacrifice him to me there. Did God have him sacrifice him? No. God is going to the heart of the issue, and God is not afraid to go to the heart of the issue and speak to it in your life. He's not afraid of that. Why? He wants you to have his perfect will. He wants you to experience his power in the journey. But you got to just be obedient with what he gives you. You got to be obedient to what he's saying. And it will always come from holiness and righteousness, and he's consistent to guide us in his ways, and he'll never cause us to do something that's unethical to someone else or that's unbiblical in any way, shape, or form. The Bible explains God is love, and he speaks progressively and consistently in that format. 1 John 4:7-8 says, Beloved, let us love one another. It says, for love is of what? God. Love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. People will say, I can't stand that. I hate that person. I hate them. God's not speaking that to you. You know what? God understands how I feel about this person. God understands how I feel about this situation, and that person could just die. I hope that person burns. I mean, we've heard this. That person is evil and has no reason for... Okay, careful. God's love. He speaks through that. God knows how to take care of people. He knows how to take care of situations. He doesn't need our help on that. We just got to trust him, amen? Got to trust him. He speaks progressively. He speaks consistently. And thirdly, God speaks faithfully. God speaks faithfully. There's nothing more frustrating than meeting somebody and shaking their hand. You get to talk. You leave the conversation and you don't know where you stand with them. You ever met somebody like that? You're just not sure where to stand with them. A lot of times in the foyer at church, I'll be standing there before, after service. I'm meeting people. Invariably, after service, I'll meet some new people in the church, and somebody will come up and go, oh, wow, this is great. Hey, is this your first time? Great. Hey, it's good to meet you. My name's Alan, blah, blah, blah. Get talking, and we love this church. This is great. This is wonderful. This is just what we needed and all this. And then I never see them again. Like, I think I know where we stand, but then I never see them again. Or, you meet somebody and you think, man, I don't, did they like me? Did they not like me? What? It just seems like that you couldn't connect. And there's nothing worse than looking at somebody and just not knowing where you stand. I think people do this with God sometimes. It's like, I come to him, but I just don't know if really, what. Listen, God speaks. And when God speaks, it's progressive and it's consistent, but it's faithful. It's faithful to his word. His word says he's done everything to redeem your life. He's done everything to offer you hope. He's done everything. You don't ever have to walk from a conversation with God and wonder where you stand. Sometimes we'll look at a book and we'll go, man, I bet that's a good book. And I've read some good books that had some good covers, and I've read some good books that had some bad covers. It's hard to judge a book by its cover. And I've read some not so good books, it's just like boring whatever, that had a great compelling cover. We don't have to worry about trying to read God or where we stand with him like we do maybe with each other. God is progressive, he's consistent, but man, church, he's faithful. He's faithful to who he is, he's faithful to what he says, and he's faithful to you. He'll never leave you, he'll never forsake you. He's always there. And that's how he speaks. And when he speaks, that's what he means. That's what he's implying. But it will require faith. Faith's not always fun. Understanding that God's progressive, consistent, faithful makes all the difference in our daily walk. He's speaking every day. And from the beginning of creation, this was the pattern. I love in the first book of the Bible, Genesis, you see God's creative power, and he speaks, and it is. He speaks, and it is. It speaks, and it comes into existence. He speaks, and at the end of it, of him speaking, he looks at it and says, that's good. That's good. See, what God has to speak to you, and the end result, it's going to be good. It's going to be for your good. It's going to be for his glory, but you get to experience that in a victorious walk with him. Will it be hard? Sure. That's why you need him. And he's going to speak that into your life and that opportunity to take hold of what he has versus what you have or can manufacture. I want to close with this. Isaiah 55, 10 through 11 says this. It says, for as the rain and the snow come down. That describes South Dakota real well, right? For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Listen, verse 11, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It says, it shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. See, what God speaks to you is not flippant. What God speaks to you is not to just be considered. What God speaks to you is life. It has the potential for giving life. It has the potential for a foundation. It has the power to change your life forever. That's what God speaks. That's what God's speaking. You say, I just don't know if I can hear him. You need to open your ears and your eyes and your hearts to receive, because every day, church, I'm telling you, he's speaking, and he did it today. He's speaking to you. Are you listening? Are you listening? See, God speaks progressively to us, and that means it's consistent, it's faithful, and it's an ongoing opportunity in this journey to take hold. And it may start as simple as a birthday cake. It may be as simple as moving from where you're at to where you need to be. But I've never known anything different, and I just wish God would bless me right where I'm at. Maybe he can, but maybe that's not what he's speaking. Maybe he's going, you know what? Let's get you out of your comfort zone, because you've gotten lazy there. You've gotten ineffective there. You're trying to make everything fit where you're at, and I don't have you. I don't want you where you're at. I want you to move out from where you're at. And that could be a place, but it also could be a mindset. God's speaking. Are you listening?